Woo! There ain't nobody like me, baby. The Golden Stallion here with you for another live Q&A, baby, that we get once a month. Well, at least once a month. You know, maybe if it gets to a point, maybe I'll set up a reward where we can do multiple of these a month. We'll see. But the podcast champion's here for you. I got my belt on if you're seeing the actual video, because this is the one that one time I had to do it without video, but most of the time I like to do it right from the beautiful BDSM studio, that being Brian's Dungeon of Sex and Magic. Don't get any ideas. But if you're looking at the video, baby, I got my belt on right here. Woo, there's the champ. Hold that baby up high. Hell yes. You got to have the look to carry that baby around too. That thing is heavy as hell. It's full on replica. But anyway, we'll put that aside now. Now that everybody's probably had the chance to see it. So, woo, there we go. All right, set that down. It's probably going to make a noise. Yep, there's a noise. Okay. Well, I did get some questions and some pre-questions in for the show today that we will probably cover. Of course, if you want to join in, you can ask questions right in the YouTube chat if you'd rather, or you can join in on the Hangout if you want to, but we'll see. So I don't imagine anybody listening to the sound of my voice right now is going to watch the Grammys, because I think that's tonight. I could be wrong about that. I will be watching the Royal Rumble with the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. That's going to be a hell of a time. And I mean, for me, you know, don't worry, we're going to get into tech really quickly. Okay. So for me, the Royal Rumble was always the best, like, wrestling pay-per-view event, because there's nothing else quite like it. And you're just, you know, there's the beauty of, obviously, the 30 wrestlers coming in, and I'm most excited about the first women's Royal Rumble that they're holding this year. But the beauty is those 30 wrestlers, some of them, some of them you're aware of ahead of time of who's going to be in it, but a lot of other ones you have no idea. And for a while, that was like a way for a lot of classic, like, 80s wrestlers, or now it would be more like 90s wrestlers, that they could come back and they would come in, even if it was for a few minutes, and it would just be really exciting when you'd have that. It's almost like, you know, it's like reading a Justice League of America comic, and out of nowhere, the Justice Society, you know, somebody from the Justice Society would show up before the Justice Society was like a major comic book thing again. So anyway, excited for that. Speaking of comic books, I did watch, I was just watching earlier today, just before I'm recording this, I was actually working out. But before that, I did watch Gotham by Gaslight, which is the latest Batman movie. It's an animated movie, which I'll do an episode. I'll do a Patreon episode that's a review of that, because actually when I do reviews of, especially of the DC animated movies, those are some of my most popular episodes that I do. And they were really like, the point I make in all of those reviews is that if the DC animated movies out of their animated universe, okay, if those were considered comic book movies, nobody would be talking about Marvel. Like, I mean, because they are just leaps in 9 times out of 10, they are leaps and bounds better than any full on live action Marvel movie. I mean, just by a long shot. You know, I even think, frankly, as far as like story and action and what goes on, I think that the 2009 animated Wonder Woman movie is actually better than, you know, Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman movie. I think it's way better. In fact, I still hope one day we can get the R-rated cut of that, because originally it was going to be R-rated, and that would have been awesome. And that's one of the things that continually puts the DC animated universe a cut above. And in this one, in Gotham by Gaslight, which, you know, it's no different, because it's very sexy. And I mean, like, there's literal rampant sex. Not that, you know, it's done quote unquote conventionally, tastefully, but you know, it's there. It's heavily at least hinted at, or even, you know, kind of seen. Like Gotham by Gaslight opened up with, spoiler alerts, not that it's going to ruin anything, but it opens up with Poison Ivy doing like a burlesque dance, you know, and like there's guys in the crowd saying, yeah, take it off, you know, the whole thing. And so Gotham by Gaslight is based off of a comic book that sort of set off the entire Elseworlds thing, where you'd have, you know, kind of alternate universes of, or where characters like famous comic book characters would end up getting put into, would get put in different situations. In this case, it would be, I think the original comic was like 1889 was the year for it. And I imagine the movie's the same, even though the movie and the comic are two very different things, like very, very different things. Kind of a similar story, but the resolution to the story, what goes on within the story, and all of that is vastly different from the comic book. So you really do, even if you love the comic book, which I love the original Gotham by Gaslight, which also had a sequel comic because it was so popular. And maybe it'll get a sequel movie. I don't know. But because it's so different, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that off. But, you know, yeah, even if you love the comic, watch Gotham by Gaslight, because it's that different, and it's so well executed and it's so well done. The soundtrack is fantastic. Again, the action, a lot of what goes on is incredibly sexy. I'll do a full review of it later, but I enjoyed the hell out of it. Like I thought it was awesome, and you know, easily, well, Black Panther's probably going to be great, but this could easily be, I could see this as staying ranked in my mind. If I were to count comic book movies, animated and live action, fuck Infinity War, I don't give a shit. This is probably, you know, this could already be movie of the year as far as comic book movies go. It was that, in my opinion, it was that good. And I love that kind of classic style where it's, you know, kind of Victorian and everything. But you know, there's elements of some, you know, kind of high tech elements to it. I really dig that kind of shit. Anyway, so, okay. Let's get into some of the questions that were asked ahead of time, because we do have those, and then we'll see if anybody ends up joining in or asking in the YouTube live chat. They're certainly welcome to do that. Here we go. Whoa, too many browsers open. Too many browsers. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Yeah, if I recall, the live Q&A is today. I won't be able to make it, unfortunately, but I did have a question. Regardless, it's probably worth asking in private so as not to put you on the spot live with your sponsor. Question relates to Zen Caches, which, Stallion breaking in, Zen Cache is a Sovryn Tech sponsor, relates to Zen Cache's partnership with IOHK. If I recall, you're really not a fan of Charles Hoskinson, probably because of quote unquote governance ideas he's had, ideas he's spoken about, and projects he was involved in, though I'm not sure. Given he and IOHK/Cordano are more politically neutral and are mostly technical projects, is this a good time to bury the hatchet with Charles Hoskinson? Or are you somewhat concerned with Zencash partnering up with them? Feel free not to answer this. I don't want to put you in an awkward spot. Cheers. Okay, so let's talk about that. Now, Charles Hoskinson, for those that don't know, he was one of the lead guys behind Ethereum, and I am not a fan of Ethereum at all, for a variety of reasons. Initially, when I heard about Ethereum, I was like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. But I quickly fell into, inside of a couple weeks, I quickly fell into the school of thought that, wait a minute, Turing Complete is actually, and I get credited for this, even though I didn't exactly come up with it, but I might have popularized it a little bit more, the term. Turing Complete should actually be considered Turing vulnerable, meaning that having a platform that can do anything, it might be a bad idea because it's not inherently secure. As to where, because of Bitcoin's more limited nature, that's a good thing, because that gives you less attack vectors, less exploits, etc. And so I felt that, and what I've been saying for years is that, well, I think Satoshi, he could have done Turing completeness with Bitcoin, but he didn't, because he figured, well, this is more secure that I don't. And that's why Turing completeness isn't a major part of a lot of, and it's not, Turing completeness isn't even that big a deal. Like, it was kind of a marketing thing at the time. Fonts, like literally fonts on your computer are Turing complete, like this is not some weird, some wild, computer magic or anything that's going on. It's not order of the day, but it's not uncommon necessarily. So with that said, so Charles Hoskinson was behind that. I had some oh boy, there's stuff I'm willing to talk about, and there's stuff I'm not really willing to talk about, even though this is sort of behind a paywall. So Charles Hoskinson has made claims. He has made statements that I vehemently disagree with. And the person who asked the question is right, that I have concerns over things he said about governance and all this. and there were a lot of other things, like, and understand, like, I've seen Charles Hoskinson at events where he's talking about things where there were videos that never got released from some of these events, in fact, which I find to be kind of weird. I even spoke at those events and the video never really came out. And this is one of the reasons that I do independent recordings. I don't care how bad the quality of the recording is. I like to get the best that I can. But I want independent recordings of what I do, because I can't count on these conferences to ever actually release what I care to say or what I do. In fact, I've even had, I don't want to get sidestepped on this, but I've even had where conferences cut out part of what I said, probably because they thought it was too radical, like that I went too far or something like that, which is hilarious because I never, ever, 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 ever espouse violence. I never talk about violence. Like I don't, it's not a part of the program. And that's the only thing really anybody should be scared about. Everything else is just part of the ideological arena. So that's why I do independent recordings of things. I haven't gotten to the point where I independently record other speakers or anything like that. I'm half tempted when stuff like this, doesn't come out. So anyway, burying the hatchet with Charles Hoskinson. So, or do I have concerns over Zencash being, which is a Sovryn Tech sponsor and a project that I am a big supporter of, and I really am. I'm a huge believer in it. I'm a big supporter of it all the way. I love what they're doing, secure nodes, the whole thing, potentially becoming a DAG, which we've talked about those in like the past month on Sovryn Tech. I'm all about all of this different stuff, which is part of it is possible through IOHK. All right. So, IOHK seems to be fairly benign. And I mean, there's a lot of, oh boy, there's so much like rumor mill and dirt sheets and drama in the Bitcoin and blockchain space, obviously, like Charles Hoskinson, as I understand it, and I can be corrected if someone wishes to correct me somehow, like he pretty much got kicked out of Ethereum. And it was apparently because he was a scammer of some kind, and it was a very ugly situation. I've heard stories here and there. No need to mention names. It's just it's all very, very crazy. I disagree with a lot of the opinions that he holds, which I've already said. So I guess bottom line, all right, let's get to it. So do I have concerns around Zencash working with IOHK? Not exactly, at least not in the way that maybe people would think I'd have problems. I was a little concerned, and I'm only saying this here. I was a little concerned that, like, I don't know, when I first heard about the partnership, I was like, yeah, but why does IOHK need Zencash? Why don't they just develop their own coin? And because IOHK kind of had the stronger hand in the situation. Okay. But at the same time, like, I don't think anybody like really that knee deep in the blockchain space would let Charles Hoskinson really run roughshod with another company. I think that they would, like, he'd be reined in, even if he had some kind of good ideas or some good technical ability, or he has some kind of like, magic ability to raise money from the dead, as it were. Like I'm not ready to bury the hatchet with Charles Hoskinson. No, I don't know. There's parts of, so here's a funny thing. If you didn't catch this, okay, there was a recent Tatiana show. If I think of it, I'll link to it in the audio version of this in the show notes. There was an interesting episode of the Tatiana show where Rob Viglione, the head of, one of the co-founders of Zencash, and Charles Hoskinson were on, and they were talking about their partnership, how they're working together. Okay. And in that, Charles Hoskinson rips on Ethereum, rips on like all these different things. And the funny thing is that these are all things that I said years ago. They were the same exact criticisms, like almost verbatim of what I had said. And now he talks about it, not necessarily, I don't know that he claimed that they're original thoughts on his part, but kind of what started a problem between he and I was, that I had these feelings about Ethereum and these concerns about a lot of these blockchain projects. And now seemingly he agrees with me. Okay. So, but that said, I'm not necessarily prepared to bury the hatchet. I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of people in the blockchain space I just don't fucking trust. That's it. I don't trust them. Certainly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then there's even like projects that I think people would consider to be benign or even liberty friendly, where I don't trust the people involved, and I don't trust the project, at all. There's a reason I don't talk about blockchain stuff every week. I think everybody wants me to, and honestly, I find that kind of annoying because let's be clear, folks. There are very few things in the blockchain space that are genuinely game changing, that are genuinely like going to, I think, help empower individuals. Zencash happens to be one of those. Zcash happens to be one of those, I think. There's Bitcoin, obviously. There's a slew of them, or well, not a slew, but there's a few out there. But there aren't that many in comparison to how many actual projects or technologies or whatever that, or coins or tokens, whatever you want to call it, that are out there. There aren't that many. So I can't talk about it every week, just like I don't think that there's enough news in Bitcoin to talk about Bitcoin singularly, like every week. Okay. So, I mean, and that's not me being depressed, because the projects that are amazing are just that. They're amazing, and they're going to change things, and it's really exciting. I mean, we live in exceptionally exciting times with what's happening in technology. The thing is the exciting shit isn't getting talked about by TechCrunch. Okay, the exciting shit isn't really getting talked about by Forbes. It's just not. It's not on their radar because it's kind of happening underneath, and generally they're probably afraid of what these people have to say. Like a guy that I do trust in this space is Rob Viglione, the guy who's the head of Zencash. Obviously, I trust Andreas Antonopoulos. Like there are people in the space that I trust, but I mean, it is a small selection of names. It really, really is. And I have a lot of people reach out to me to talk about this, and and some people ask to be on the show and whatever. And well, I'm trying to be kind to them by not having them on the show, because if they came on the show, I'm not going to be nice about it. Okay. Like, I'm really not going to be fucking nice about it. It would end up probably being a very ugly situation. And then they wouldn't even let the audio get released. And then what the fuck's the point? Because when I have a guest on Sovryn Tech, I give them complete control. I said, look, if you want something edited, you just tell me. Okay. So generally, I'm probably, like, if I was going to have somebody that could potentially be where there could be a very heated debate, there could be some conflict, I would have to, we'd have to say, and I don't need like a full-on contract, but I would have to say to them, or I would warn them, in an email or something, and saying, I think there's a chance that we could seriously disagree. I am going to release this audio in its entirety when it comes out, so be aware of that. And then they could choose whether or not they'd actually want to come on the show. So yeah, but bottom line is I'm actually not worried about IOHK working with Zencash. I understand the relationship. I think IOHK has some excellent developers there. And, and it's a team that's really IOHK is a genuine success. Okay. And also they believe in the space. I got to give them credit for, they accept payment in the cryptos that they work on. All right. So they have all the incentives in the world to whoever they're working with, say Zencash or whatever, to make it work, because otherwise they lose out on money, so there's a lot about IOHK that I really like. So yeah, I'm not really concerned about that. At the same time, I still have, very real concerns about individuals more so. In the blockchain space, as far as that goes. Let's see. We got something in the YouTube chat here. How about the explosion of blockchain/Bitcoin experts in the past few months? Suddenly everyone's a consultant or has their own podcast. A lot of fucking opportunists for sure. Yeah. That's a great point too. Suddenly everybody's a Bitcoin consultant. I mean, I've gotten hired on to jobs with clients that I still work with. Honestly, in the past few months, where they wanted me to kind of be a consultant, or, to do more direct work when it comes to a lot of blockchain tech and all of that. And I'm honored by that, and these are people who have been burned a lot. And so they only hire people that they really, really trust. But yeah, like a lot of these, once you get outside of, like I say, the Andreases or Pamela Morgan, people like that. Yeah, it's honestly, it's a bunch of opportunists, if not scammers. You're absolutely right. And all the podcasts out there, these they're not going to be here in a year. It was, let's see, this would have been like 2013, 2014, when Stephanie and I were really very seriously. Wow, the camera went off there for a second. I don't know why I did that earlier too. Anyway, Stephanie and I were very seriously, like, we were going around to a lot of blockchain conferences, a lot of Bitcoin conferences and everything. And like, especially there was that first Texas Bitcoin conference, which was fairly well done. I mean, well, anyway, I talked about that years ago on the show. And there's the vendor room, and there's all these different companies there and everything, even though the vendors kind of got pushed off to the side, and that was a little unfair. But anyway, like, I collected so many cards from these people, all these different companies. And I had to, because at the time I was actually working for Free Talk Live, and I was doing ad sales. So I would reach out to these companies saying, hey, Free Talk Live has a great Bitcoin community. These are the people that you want to reach out. Probably with a stack of cards. I'm holding up my hands here on the video so you can see. And I'm not kidding. A stack of cards like that, like, this is almost a foot-high stack of cards that I collected over a year or so from Bitcoin and blockchain companies. Okay. I went through that, and I think maybe, this is just a round figure, like maybe 5% of that stack of cards of all these companies that supposedly were starting up and were coming out and everything, and they were going to change the world and all that shit, were gone. They were just gone. Like you'd get email responses that, this URL doesn't go anymore. Whatever. You'd be getting, mailer daemons, all that stuff. Or I would get emails and find out that, they had to close up shop. I mean, there's tons of these where that happened. And yeah, that's part of, I mean, one could say that that's nature of the beast in a nascent space, but at the same time, like that, it's always the marketing, right? Because if they weren't talking to me like they were going to change everything and that they were going to be super successful and they were going to do this crazy seed round and all this stuff, I wouldn't find it so funny. But I couldn't help but laugh at all these fucking companies that were just gone. Yeah, it was a very crazy time, and I think it's still very similar. But that's because all of this is still very early. Even that is super early. We're still really in the super early stages as far as that, as far as the whole Bitcoin and blockchain space goes. Like I say, this is the most incredible metric or statistic out of 2017, that not even like 1% of the world's population holds cryptocurrencies. That's insane. That's insane. And if you're a part of that 1%, honestly, that puts you in a very real sense part of the 1%, because I genuinely believe that in the future, the bulk of money is going to be cryptocurrency. Like, that is going to be, like, cash and credit cards and things like this aren't going to be the norm anymore. Cryptocurrencies and, the use of wallets and all that stuff, that's going to be the norm. I'm not saying that that's 100% a good thing, but I am saying that that's the direction that things are going. I think that there might be a very real dropout from the financial system into these cryptocurrencies. And, there's guys, analysts that have actually been around, who make the claim that, put everything you've got into crypto, because, this is all, everything else, all the fiat and all that stuff is going to fall apart sooner or later. Now, let's be fair here. That kind of claim has been made over and over and over again. And people would say the same thing about gold. Okay. But with cryptocurrencies, like, there's genuine advantages and wealth creation that happens with it that ironically isn't so much based on scarcity like precious metals would be. And I have no problem with precious metals, obviously. Okay. I think you should diversify as much as you can, stores of value. But yeah, I think there's advantages here. And again, there's the fact that, like, this is wealth creation really not based upon, I mean, yes, there's a limited amount of tokens or Bitcoin that you can have or whatever. Sure. But, like, it's really not based upon the scarcity of, like, a mineral, of like a physical mineral. You can make as many tokens as you want, and their value, well, I mean, that's based upon creativity, which is nearly, or what can be based upon creativity, which is nearly limitless. Okay. So my point being is that cryptocurrencies hint at a pseudo post scarcity. Okay. That I think really can be the future. All right. A tremendous book I think people should read this. It doesn't really talk about Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or anything like that, but it does give you a very interesting analysis through the window of science fiction, which, as I said, I think I said it in this week's episode of Sovryn Tech. Was that episode 262 or 263? Where I said that, science fiction allows our brains. It's such an important genre of media because it allows our brains to wrap around the rapid changes that our civilization and that we as humans are going through on a second by second basis. Okay. It's really important, and I've been saying that for some time. So when you take science fiction and you try to take it a little bit, a little extra literally and apply it to what's going on right now, I think you can end up with some very interesting theories and some very interesting predictions. And a book that I recommend, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Star Trek fan, but the book is called Trekonomics. I can't remember the name of the author. I would have to look it up, but the book is called Trekonomics. And the audiobook is pretty good too. If you prefer audiobooks, there is an audiobook version of it. And this is a full-on economic text. And it's an economic text. If this helps incentivize you, it really shouldn't matter whether or not this guy is quoted, but he is. But Rothbard's talked about in it. It's not an anarchist work. It's not a libertarian work at all. But Rothbard is talked about, and a wide range of economists are covered in this book. But it does talk about not so much that we're going to, like kind of the premise with Trekonomics. And I really think a great case is made. And it's not a short book. It's really not. That's why I usually when I read nonfiction, I read nonfiction. I don't listen to it. But this is such a fairly lengthy book that I was like, okay, well, let's take advantage of the fact that with audiobooks, I can cut the amount of time that it takes me to read something into like a fourth, I can shrink that amount of time so much. And so that's why I did it. And I've been meaning to actually listen to this book again. This book and Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein, I think, are just two incredibly important books right now, because cryptocurrencies are showing that I think classical economics or liberal economics or classical liberalism or all this other stuff, really isn't a very good predictor. And I call bullshit on anybody that says Hayek predicted Bitcoin. That's utter fucking nonsense. And shame on you for trying to capitalize, but pun intended. Shame on you for trying to capitalize on Bitcoin and attaching it to, some of these. And look, I don't necessarily have a problem with Hayek. I'm just saying, like, you're really stretching things. You're stretching some very small quotes that have far little importance than you are putting on them in the grand scheme. So anyway, I think those two books are really important to read. But in Trekonomics, the point I was going to get to, in Trekonomics, the case that it makes isn't that we're going to end up like going to, a bunch of planets. We're not going to end up with the United Federation of Planets, but the Earth that you see, like the lifestyle on Earth and all of that you see in, in the 24th century or even the 23rd century or whatever, that we are going to end up with that sooner or later. In fact, I've theorized that I think Jeff Bezos is actually pushing for that, where you sort of have this pseudo, because again, literally, no, you can't have post scarcity, not literally, not as in, oh, well, there's just everything everywhere and it's unlimited abundance. Okay. But even people that talk about post scarcity and don't bother to put the term pseudo in front of it, they don't even mean that. They don't mean literal post scarcity. They just mean that effective. They mean effective post scarcity, like that it's more or less like that. Okay. So anyway, so Trekonomics makes the case that, yeah, we're getting there where there is this kind of, pseudo post scarcity. And that can happen, and it'll actually happen without anybody realizing it, and it'll happen very fast. Now, I am not saying that I agree with everything and with the path and all the stuff and all the different social programs and whatever else that get laid out in Trekonomics. I am not saying I agree with those or that I even think that they're ethical or a good idea. Okay, but I am saying that I can see the case being made, and I can see things very much going in that direction. So let's see. In the YouTube chat, we got somebody who says, I heard an interview with the author of Trekonomics several months ago. It was interesting, but I never get around to it. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, like I said, even if you just do the audiobook, do the audiobook because you can listen to it I forget how many hours long it was, but you can listen to it in pretty short order, especially if you listen like me. I listen to things at like 2.3x. If it's really like heady stuff, maybe I have to bump it down to 2x or 1.8. Like I listen to most podcasts at 1.8x. Then do that, but it'll get you through it. So again, I'm not saying that this, this pseudo post scarcity is even the best idea or whatever. Like that's not my claim. I'm just saying that, yes, I can see things going in that direction, and cryptocurrencies actually make that very viable, because I don't think there's ever been anything. It's not exciting necessarily as a technology, though it's the technology that enables it. It's amazing that this wealth creation really does very much come out of nothing. Okay. And look, I know all the rules of what makes up money and all that. Like I know, I hope people that are patrons recognize that I understand what the fuck I'm talking about. And I'm not some noob when it comes to economics. Okay. But I value subjective. I know. Okay. Don't worry. I've read Menger. I've read, Mises. Like I've read almost all of Mises. Okay. I've read Rothbard. I've read them all. I know what the fuck I'm saying here. Okay. But yeah, I think cryptocurrencies are really getting us, to that place, where, or can get us to that place where there is this kind of like pseudo post scarcity. And there's interviews that you can catch with guys that, all right, we got somebody joining in, so we'll wrap this up. But there's interviews with guys who, like they admit that they are excited about cryptocurrencies because it's going to allow them to create and to bring to fruition all of these social programs, like social services style programs that they've always wanted. I mean, these are full on like your liberal. I don't know if they'd call themselves Democrats because maybe they don't want government either, but they're your real, left style liberals. Okay. And they are excited about this because they think it's going to afford them and create the system and the engine of the world that allows for all of these social programs to exist. These are things that are happening. All kinds of different people are taking advantage of this stuff. But the bottom line is that a lot of people with a lot of different ideas can engage in individual wealth creation. And I think that's what's really exciting about cryptocurrencies, more so than, again, what does the tech itself like really mean for broader, aspects and all that. So, okay. Enough talk about, boy, that was like half the episode and I ended up talking about Bitcoin and blockchains, but man, I have got, actually, I'm going to reveal this here. If he doesn't mind, because I asked this guy, he's giving me the thumbs up. I asked this guy, I said, you know what? If people listen to the Relationship Rhombus show that got released on Patreon this week, I made Stephanie a full-on co-host, and I talked about how we're going to be bringing on co-hosts into Sovryn Tech overall. And this is like, and there should be no offense in this. This is guy number 3 this is person number 3 that I talked to about being a co-host. And so Robin, welcome on to the live Q&A, man. But yeah, you are now, and I'll call it here, you are an official Sovryn Tech co-host, and we're going to be doing the Star Wars updates together, starting from February onwards, as long as you're open to it. But man, welcome to the show. What's up?
Absolutely. Thank you. And I am honored by both the invitation and the opportunity to be here.
Hell yeah.
And secondly, that shirt, man, let me see the whole thing.
Oh, all right. Let me move the microphone so people don't mind if there's a little microphone noise. Here we go. And there we are.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome? It has the whole suit. Stuff. Yeah. Breaks down the technicals of it. And I'll give everybody a little arm too while they're at it.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's great is, so when the Super Nintendo Classic came out, ThinkGeek came out with like a ton of t-shirts for almost every game that was, so like that's almost 30 t-shirts. They came out with t-shirts for almost every game. They even came out with a t-shirt for Star Fox 2. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll take that. And they came out with a shirt that just says Super Nintendo on it and everything. And I got those, but anyone that was in black, pretty much I bought. So
yeah, it actually, it reminds me of another t-shirt I've had my eye on for a little while. It's of course, it's a Star Wars shirt, but it's from the original, like, I don't remember if the arcade game came out in the late 70s or early 80s, but it's the arcade game with the vector graphics.
Oh, yeah. I love that game. That game's still totally playable too, you know what I mean?
It is. It is. Yeah.
That's something we're going to be able to do on the Star Wars updates, since I got you with me, on them now. I think we can review some classic shit, and I think that's going to make for some amazing conversations. I would love to,
because that's really where my passion with Star Wars lies, is with the classic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick, I want to read from the YouTube chat, but I want to comment on that a little bit more, and then we'll get into whatever you had to bring on. But in the YouTube chat, it says, yeah, Super Metroid is the shit. That's the shirt. If people were wondering, my shirt is Super Metroid. One of the best games ever. Yes, it was. In fact, when I first played it, like my jaw dropped when I heard a Super Nintendo game actually have voice come out, because it opens right up with, the galaxy is peace or whatever. And as soon as I heard words coming out of the TV screen from a video game, or, speech coming out of it, just my jaw hit the floor. It was such an amazing game. So intense. Anyway, back to the Star Wars thing. Yeah. Cause there's some guys out there in the Star Wars podcasting realm that have been around for a while with Star Wars, but I feel like most of them that are commentating, don't they don't remember the dark times, which is the time where, you had Return of the Jedi up until like Heir to the Empire.
And I had no Star Wars that period too.
What's that?
I have a ton to say about that entire period of time. In fact, I like, in a lot of ways, I think that was a genre defining time, for Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into it, because I could just really go on for hours about this particular period of time, but it's very important. I don't think people recognize how important the dark times were to Star Wars.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on a Star Wars update. We'll make sure that's lined up. But yeah, in fact, it's something that came to head for me, and then like I said, we'll get into what you wanted to talk about. Because when I was showing Stephanie, which Stephanie had never seen the Star Wars movies before, and so we had been going over all that in the past year or two, and she's like, I don't get it. Like why are you so crazy about it? Why are so many people so crazy about it? And I said, and that's when I came to the realization that actually, in my opinion, and you can disagree with this, but in my opinion, what actually makes Star Wars great was everything outside of it. Was what West End Games was doing, was TIE Fighter, the video games and all that, was Heir to the Empire, all that stuff. Maybe it was just the rarity of actually any new content on something that was so successful. But everything outside of it is what really that's what forged people into being Star Wars, nuts, really crazy fans, as compared to people who just enjoyed the movies,
I think that's half the equation.
Sure.
I think the other half of the equation is that Star Wars was pretty unique up until its time. Other than that, you really didn't have serious science fiction other than 2001: Space Odyssey, which was kind of, most people it was big for its time, but overall it's kind of a boring movie. Let's be honest.
Yes. No. Sure. Yep. I'll take that. Yeah.
So when Star Wars came out, it was just this paradigm busting thing that people blew their minds, especially, when they see the Star Destroyer coming over here. They'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
It completely, it was almost like another moon landing in terms of its cultural effect.
Yeah, no, you're right. And in fact, I remember an interview with James Cameron years ago, back when he was a little cooler. And he said, when he first saw Star Wars in 1977, he said, oh shit. He's like, somebody did it before I did, everybody kind of knew that this needed to be a thing, and that this was ready to happen. And that there needed to be more of this kind of, or that kind of film needed to start being, starting to happen. And, and then when it did, right. Yeah. There was nothing else like it, even amongst the great science fiction thinkers and everything. There really was, or, whatever term you want to put for it. But, I think you're onto that too. There really, there was, in fact, even after that, like during the dark times, even though there's that whole decade, there really wasn't a movie that looked as good as Return of the Jedi, that even just looked that good or looked that legit or real. I can't think of a film that had that same level of special effects, except for the Star Trek films, but those are a whole different animal.
You're forgetting one. You're the really big one that I know you love a lot, and it's not really a film, but Battlestar Galactica was really the only other competition in that sort of,
yeah, they had that scope.
Sci-fi arena.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, all right. So we could talk about that forever, but I'm sure you've got something else to bring on. Yeah, and we will talk about it. This is going to be a good time. I can't wait. I love bringing more people on. I think this is going to be really cool. I think Sovryn Tech's ready for it. So, but yeah, what do you got, man?
Back to video games, actually.
Sure. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Been on my mind for quite a while, and I just kind of like would like to hash it out with somebody else. But
All
uh,
right.
I've been really concerned about Valve software.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and it's really unfortunate because it seems like the fate of every like truly great video game company is either to be shut down by their publisher or to like essentially become, like their publishers. And
Mhm.
I see kind of Valve going down, the same pathway, unfortunately. And they were kind of like a great hope in terms of their flat hierarchy structure within the
Love
company.
that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I did too, but like since then in the intervening years, and the fact that they really haven't really been producing other than just sort of like rent seeking off of Steam. Um, we've heard some like not so great things, and there were some people who worked for Valve Software and that were fired. I was trying to find her name here, uh, uh, Jerry Ellsworth,
Okay.
and she had talked about. In fact, I'll just read the quote, um, or part of the quote. She says, "But the one thing that I found the hard way is that there's actually a hidden layer of powerful management structure in the company." And she added, "It felt a lot like high school. There are a lot of popular kids that have acquired power,
Mhm.
and there are these troublemakers and everybody in between. Everyone in between is okay, but the troublemakers are the ones trying to make the difference, and they're the ones that are getting pushed out of the company."
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see this. So what's your take on it?
Um, I don't really have like a real take on what's going on. It's really sad to me. It's unfortunate that, and it kind of like it's kind of a self-reflective thing is that we're interested in these flat structures and living without hierarchies. And
Yep.
so when we see an example of it sort of kind of like going wrong, it's kind of like we really need to examine that and find, okay, why is this happening and how can we avoid it in ourselves in the future?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it is sad because Valve has been like the company that I've brought up that said, no, you can be an absolute success and not have managers, and you can be a fairly large company. And that can happen. Um, I, man, like I feel like I want a lot more information on this. And my
Yeah,
guess is that when you get like a powerful management, so, all right, so here's the thing. So for myself, like I have, which is maybe the best thing that I could ever speak about, but for to myself, like I despise the idea of being in charge. Like I have an absolute and I don't I don't want to I don't even want to tell people what to do. Okay, now that doesn't mean that at points in my life where I've had to be in those positions that I was bad at it. Maybe even quite the opposite. I'm not patting myself on the back because I don't care for it, and some of those situations I'm far from proud of. Okay, but um yeah, I think if I'm hearing what you're saying right, I think really what has to happen is that we've got to get to a point for obviously the financials can a non-hierarchical company can work financially, like that can happen, and but what needs to be there is people that actually just don't want power at all, and I think that that's a more natural mindset
yeah,
for a human being, but that doesn't get fostered. Um, and I shouldn't use the term power, but I guess hierarchical power maybe is the term I should use. Because I mean, power is fine, personal power is fine, but like, having power over other people is just fucked up. Um, whether it's private or government. But yeah, and I don't know. I don't know how we get there. And the sad part is that I could see like Gabe Newell being really proud of how his industry is going and how everything's going with Valve. And then I could imagine like some guys at EA or at some of these other game companies that ran their publishers down into the ground. Like I'd love to see some of the names of, and I'm sure I could look it up and maybe I should, of who got hired into Valve, because like these guys could have came in, snake in the grass. I mean, and just like, started saying, oh yeah, no, let's do this, let's do that, blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, that's like a mindset that people should somehow watch out for, is like, people that are spending so much time telling other people what to do.
yeah, I agree with that. Like, and my other concern there is kind of like So I mean, what she's basically describing is cliques
Yes, right.
in form, and it's not so much about individuals having power others. It's about these concentrated cliques having, controlling, the course of things. And so, and I've heard this not just from this interview with her, but I've heard it from other places in the industry saying, this kind of exists within the company, and that and seem to unsure whether Gabe is aware of it or not, or whether he's. I mean, I could definitely see a situation, and I think this happened to George Lucas too, to a certain degree, and that you inevitably get a bunch of people who are attracted to either you or your company because of your accomplishments, and they sort of, whether consciously or unconsciously, become kind of yes men.
Yeah, sure.
And you end up getting surrounded by these people who are more than likely, competent in some way or another, but they don't have that ability to self-reflect or criticize this person or this organization that they've held up in their minds.
Yeah, I'm wondering, does Valve? I'm going to look deeper into this now that you brought it up, and maybe I'll talk about it in a future episode. But like, I'm curious if what the hell, not Type C, I forget what they call the kind of company, but you can have companies where like all the employees have like shares, like no matter when the employee was hired, no matter when they're on, every employee by the design of the company is some kind of shareholder.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of that before.
Yeah. There's a few companies I can think of that are set up that way. I forget what
there's a term for it. It's not coming to my head either.
Yeah, and there's like a legal classification, for it and everything. I think something along those lines, like I might be a bulwark against that sort of thing, because then you have to, or more or less, you should have a shareholder meeting of some kind where you can come out and say, and everybody's there and everybody's got some kind of say, and you can start naming names and kind of calling shit out. Where if it's just a company where, the hierarchy's flat, maybe that's not me. I guess the point is maybe that's not enough. And also, like I said, go ahead.
Sorry, that's a really good point, because it actually segues into kind of almost another topic, but very similar. And that I've heard this to be a reason why a lot of intentional communities end up failing, in that, a lot of situations where basically the other people in the community always end up, working for the landowner. Mm-hmm. And I think if you had kind of a situation where, like, if you had people coming into a community, and if, they worked and developed the land, and absolutely they should own it. But that's not a lot of way these communities work, is that, somebody has the legal paperwork, the contracts and whatnot, that they own the land, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to speak to that for a second. Just read quick from the YouTube chat here. It says Rick Falkvinga has a cool book on management called Swarmwise. It's out for free if you're cool with reading it on PDF. Gore-Tex is an example of a pretty flat structured company, if I remember correctly. Yeah, there's a few of these out there, and I will definitely check out Rick Falkvinga's book, Swarmwise. I imagine that's pretty interesting. But these are the alternative things alternative management styles we should be able to explore. Yeah, the landowner example is interesting, because at the risk of like falling into some kind of like Georgism or something where, nobody can actually kind of own the land, and that supposedly solves, a big problem with that. I think more, bottom line, I guess, the idea that everybody's a shareholder and has some kind of equal say is probably the best solution, for a lot of this. But there's mental aspects of this that people got to get used to. Like, troublemakers should absolutely be held up. Like, somebody that complains a lot in a company, in fact, I'm reminded of Babylon 5. And which is great. I'm glad I get to mention Babylon 5, where Michael Garibaldi takes over this huge company on Mars. He fires the entire management team, and the people he hires on are all the people that have been complaining and that have been reported regularly and everything. And he says, because you're the guys that actually, give a shit about the company. That's why you're complaining. That's why you're getting reported, and all this stuff. And I think like that kind of attitude looking for people with that kind of attitude is really, really important. Now, I mean, you can certainly get within a company, you can get people that are just busybodies, and are just wanting to feel good about themselves. But
Right.
I think a good, I don't want to say leader, but a person that can choose and help set up teams and everything, would do well to look for that kind of person, because a lot of times those serious complaints come from from a point of passion, which is the most important thing.
I've certainly experienced that in my time in the corporate world.
Sure.
And that I tried to bring not just complaining for the sake of complaining, but bringing back complaints that would hey, there's an inefficiency in our system here. This is how I think one of the ways we could address it. Certainly not the only way, but
right.
Yeah, that's that kind of attitude and the kind of conventional corporate atmosphere is not conducive to any sort of advancement.
Yeah, absolutely. Troublemakers are, Harlan Ellison, he always said that, be a troublemaker. And I totally agree with that, that needs to be a thing. I
think our people are just really not really like trained to like identify like good criticism. I mean, people a lot of times they can't differentiate between, a nuanced discussion about what's wrong with something, and then somebody saying, well, I don't like this because I'm not happy. There's a big
difference. That could really come from like just the being trained into authoritarianism and into
I think like internet culture feeds into that a lot too, because I mean it just seems to be like the way a lot of people argue on the internet.
Sure, right. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, I don't know. I'm worried, like, especially because Valve has so much of what Valve does, and the way that everything's set up, like with Steam, is so unattractive. In fact, it might be, a great case might be able to be made that, look, this is what happens when you start introducing hierarchies, is suddenly everything becomes stagnant. And, and you get like these BS features and everything.
I try not to buy from them as much.
I was just going to say the same thing. Yeah. And I know you're that way too. We go to like GOG.com or something like that.
Right. I mean, and it's unfortunate that, Valve like holds such, like a market space, and the fact that there's a lot of these publishers who are like, you know what, we'll just put it on Steam and that'll be it. And they don't consider the alternatives. I've even seen like a bunch of physical, games with physical releases in box in stores. And you look around, you look on the back of the box, and it says, "Oh, you need a Steam account to, play this game." And it's
yeah. What finally got me, I'll tell you, what finally got me into taking Steam seriously was, I guess this was 2010 when Duke Nukem Forever came out. I got that for PC because, in my opinion, that's exactly the platform you should play Duke Nukem on.
Right.
And I know that game, like some people think that the game shit. Actually, most of the complaints people have about the game have to do with the console versions, but that's besides the point. So I bought the game. I bought like the collector's edition. I still have it. I still have the box with like it has the little Mac cat in it and like these poker chips and all this different stuff. I'm such a huge Duke Nukem fan. But anyway, I bought it and I go to install it and I'm like, I'm ready to play it. And it's like late night because I went to a midnight release for it because a friend of mine was the manager at the local GameStop and everything. And I go to install it and it says, "Oh, we have to download the game from like Steam and whatever." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And I had to, and I had to use my Steam account and everything. And I thought that was such bullshit. But I wanted to play Duke, and so what choice did I didn't have a choice. Otherwise, like if that never happened, I'd probably still be really hot on getting physical games. But even that's not really possible. I mean, it is like 8-Bit Do and some others will sell physical copies, and sometimes they get out on Amazon and everything. But like you said, they still require you to either like register with GOG or register with Steam. Obviously, you want to register with GOG because there's no DRM.
I haven't seen any games with physical releases that require you to register on GOG yet. It's
No Man's Sky was the first one that I saw.
Okay, so that's pretty recent.
Yeah. I think 8-Bit Do might have came out with like a physical version that came with like one of the fighter craft and everything.
Right.
But then, and they had a physical release, the whole thing, but you could choose which one you wanted when they sent you the game.
I have a feeling that was more from coming from Sony than from GOG.
Sure. Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. I don't think GOG was like necessarily requiring it. I think it's just they wanted, I mean, I give GOG credit because really they were just like allowing you to have the option to have the game in GOG.
Right.
You know, because at the same time, like, you know, once you put the GOG code in, you know, you don't need the physical release anymore, and you don't need GOG either. You know, you can just download the game DRM free, and you can install it anywhere, anytime without a GOG client or anything.
Right.
So yeah, I don't mind them doing that. I don't think that they're necessarily requiring it, but you know, there it is. So do you want to read one other quick thing?
God knows. I mean, like you know, they do allow an option for you to download and back up like onto a CD or something.
Steam does, you say, or GOG?
No, well, they both do, but GOG is always DRM free.
Right.
So you can download and make a physical copy yourself, and then you never need GOG again.
Yeah, which I think is the main reason that actually a lot of companies like 2K and some others where they won't release on GOG is they are absolutely terrified of not having DRM in the picture. And I mean, I think that's wrong of them because obviously a lot of companies are making a ton of money off of without DRM, but you know, whatever. I see where they're coming from. I don't agree with them, but I do see where they're coming from. Going to read something quick from the YouTube chat here, and actually we'll let Jacob in on this action. He can join both of us. Let's see, but here it is. We've been so heavily socialized to accept hierarchies for our whole lives, so it's not surprising when there are issues with flat organizations. Of course, we should still try to flatten hierarchies. It's just not easy. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and part of this comes from like permission-based culture and all this. I mean, we're just, we're taught from, cradle to grave that you need to ask, you need to look for permission from, and this isn't like consent. Permission-based culture doesn't mean consent. It just means that like you have to get permission from some authority, from some legislative body, from something like that. And because we think that we have to keep doing that, sure, it creates very skewed human interactions, I think.
Yeah, so permission-based culture kind of implies a lack of consent to begin with.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. Is right. It's actually anti-consent in a very real way. So Jacob, I see you're in. Do you want to comment on anything? You can jump right on in if you're there. There he is. Man, that hair. Robin and I are just looking at you like, God damn it.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I know I say it every time, but it's striking. So, revel in it, my friend. But what do you got, man?
First, I just want to say to Robin, congrats on the new co-hosting gig.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing your point of view on those episodes.
I can't tell you how excited I was when he DM'd me on Twitter and asked me to come on. I was like, holy shit, yes.
yeah, let's do this. Yeah. So no, that's going to be a ton of fun. But go ahead, Jacob.
Oh yeah, I mean, you guys were talking about the hierarchy thing. That was you read what I said in the chat, and that's basically all I wanted to say about that specifically. I was gonna, if you have anything else to say on that, go ahead, because I was gonna echo back to the when you were talking about economics and the pseudo scarcity earlier. Sure,
yeah, but I agree with your point, Jacob. I mean that. That we are taught like that, no, there needs, you need to have permission from this legislative body or this authority system or something. And, we are taught that no, hierarchies are totally normal and all this. And I just, again, I really don't believe it. And in fact, it even, go ahead. Oh, you're cutting out. That's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, you even see it amongst libertarians, how, hierarchies aren't necessarily bad.
Mm-hmm.
You hear them say so often, and it's even amongst anarchist libertarians.
Yeah.
Oh, we can still have hierarchies in a fully private society, and I'm just like, you're kind of missing the point there. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And I think it speaks to that a lot of people really. I think that a lot of people get attracted to these ideas because one could argue that basic libertarianism and basic anarchism Of course, really, both of those terms should have huge expoundings upon, but regardless, let's just run with it. Both of those really do talk about empowering the individual. And that's a very exciting proposition for people who have been told that they don't have actual power most of their lives, whether they consciously or unconsciously realize that. And I think that for a lot of people, though, it excites them that they have the potential to get like this power. But so really what I'm saying is that they get into libertarianism or anarchism because they think that, oh, well, if we get rid of government, that means I get to be in charge of a bunch of people. And I worry about that. And I see leanings in that direction where there really are, there's people who they just want the reins of power. It's not that they don't think that hierarchy should go away. They just want to be on the top of the pyramid themselves.
Yeah, I see that all too often.
Yeah.
Yep. I think we all
and then you get for some reason, so many libertarians are fawning over this Jordan Peterson guy, and he's all talking about how natural and we should desire to keep them in place. It just boggles my mind.
Yeah. And this speaks to a broader issue, with a lot of this where, you get a lot of people where I think some of them, their hearts are in the right place, where they want to get rid of these institutions, these coercive institutions and everything. But then they don't realize that maybe without the coercive institutions, and if there was a more natural social evolution with the human generation, that everything would look vastly different, like vastly different, like so many different, like even styles of companies, perhaps like hierarchies within companies and all these different things just wouldn't exist at all. But they just expect to get rid of the coercive force and allow everybody to get wealthier, but more or less everything else will stay the same. The social mores will stay the same. Cities cities wouldn't necessarily look the same, but by and large things would be not so different from what they are now. And I think a lot of that kind of started with some early, more individualist anarchists wanting to make the idea of anarchism more appealing. It was almost like marketing to make it more appealing. Well, no, it's not going to change too much. Don't worry. Or I even think like the Mises Institute. One of the biggest things in the Mises Institute is Catholicism. And I think part of that is because it creates the shorthand of when somebody asks an anarcho-capitalist, perhaps, hey, but what about, what are we going to do about a justice system? Like what if somebody kills my sister and blah, 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 like what's going to happen with that if we don't have police and we don't have governments, etc. And I think that a lot of the more Catholic ANCAPs, they use the Catholicism as a shorthand to say, well, we can actually, don't worry, Jesus will solve it in the end. So justice will be done in the end. And that's the solace that you can take. But, right now we don't want any of this stuff here. And I think that's a total cheat, total cop out. And yeah. I mean, that's kind of a bottom line, I think, of what Robin was bringing up and what you're bringing up overall is just that, the way things are run right now is not how things could or should be. If we had anything remotely like actual freedom and choice, in this world.
Yeah, I guess if
Any thoughts on that?
Kind of point to why I wanted to bring this up is it's for the reason that we need to keep talking about these things and practice, mindfulness about it. Because if we stop talking about it, we stop having these kind of conversations, people don't see them, they're not aware of the arguments, and they keep persisting in these sort of mindsets they're stuck in. Yeah,
absolutely. Jacob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I have ANCAP friends who they're well-meaning, and I like them as people, but I have heavy disagreements with some of their positions, especially considering like you said, they think that things would basically be they are now, just without government and without ignoring the fact that it's possibility for private tyrannies to exist as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, I remember where I really saw it is when I my time in New Hampshire, and I'm sure Brian could speak volumes on this.
Oh,
when I was there, it was actually when Ron Paul was running his second presidential campaign, and I turned a few heads with actually questioning the great holy Ron Paul, and I just couldn't believe it. because they were all wrapped up in it. It was at the height of the campaign, and they were all into it and excited, and more power to them. But it's like I guess I have to be the little devil on the shoulder, kind of prodding towards people towards the truth, or at least a truth.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what's sad, is because that kind of speaks to, I think, to like what we were saying about Valve, where we want to get to the mindset where people just they're not like the idea of being in charge or of telling other people what to do is just like anathema. Like, what? Yeah. I've no real interest in that. At least in a serious fashion. And yeah, a lot of people here really want to play politics, and some of them are very nice people. I mean, you can always say that. But they want to get involved in politics, and when they ask me about it, and I just look at them and I just say, like, how could you want to do this? Like what? Are you a masochist? Like, what's going on?
Well, not only that, I mean, like, it's like, and this is a lesson I took on early on here again because of science fiction, because of Dune. Mm-hmm. And that, sometimes it's the most well-intentioned leader that does the greatest harm.
Yeah. Well, right. Yeah. Muad'Dib, sure. Or Leto the Second, even.
Right.
Yeah. That's, yeah. Empower the individual. That needs to be the message that gets out there. And often enough, that's not exactly how it ends up working out. So, anyway, I think we'll wrap this up. We're past 5 o'clock, and this is a good time. Was there anything else you need to get out, Robin or Jacob? Anything that you had?
No, I got to sign off too. So
cool. All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, man. And we'll be connecting in February. Star Wars update with Robin and Brian. It's going to be a hell of a time.
All right. See you next month.
Cool, man. So, and Jacob, thank you so much for being on, as always. Voice of reason that appears on this. I
appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for the January Q&A, Hangout Q&A. There were some other questions that got put in ahead of time, but we can save those for another time, or for even like a Wednesday Q&A. Don't forget that if you want your questions perhaps to get to an even broader audience, starting next week, okay, that would be, let's look at a date here. Starting on, wow, that's amazing. It is going to be February. So starting on February 3rd, from that episode, 2018, from that episode of Sovryn Tech Prime episodes on, there will be a Q&A segment there for everybody to be able to get engaged in. But of course, I won't be able to spend as much time on a question as I would say on a Wednesday Q&A or on a Q&A like this on the monthly Hangout. Those are always only going to be for patrons. But there will be a Q&A, and if you wanted something to be talked about broader that maybe had to do with the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, or that you wanted more people to hear about or something, feel free to ask the question, even send in the long email, and we're bringing that back. But you're not losing anything as patrons, not at all. You're always going to get a top priority in my mind. So and I'm going to prioritize it in my schedule as well. So anyway, yeah, lots of fun. Great to have people jumping in and joining in. Thank you to the people on YouTube that were watching. And of course, when you listen to this in the audio version, you can find, if you want to watch the video and maybe see some of the stuff, some of the goings on in the BDSM studio. Not that there's like anything really major going on behind me, except for some matrix code going up and down. And you got to see my podcast champion belt. Check out the video. The link will be in there. And of course, I post this within hours after it gets recorded. So another great content. Boy, if you didn't, all right, I'm going to say this quick. If you didn't listen to, this was so much fun. If you didn't listen to the Fencer of Minerva part 4, even if you hadn't listened to any of the other ones, or you have no interest in watching hentai, boy, that was hot. And it was a lot of fun. I had a ton of fun recording that. And, oh boy. Well, anyway, we'll see what all that means for the future. That's it, everybody. I will see you on the other side. Woo!